Welcome to the Genetic Genius Podcast, where we explore the latest research and insights into the fascinating world of genetics, hormones, and alternative health. I'm your host, Dr. Lulu, and in today's episode, we are joined by a special guest, Dr. Kelly Kessler, a licensed physical therapist, wellness coach, and the host of the podcast, Rewiring Health. Dr. Kessler specializes in helping highly sensitive, people-pleasing, perfectionist women in pain to self-heal through nervous system regulation. Her personal journey of recovering from an eating disorder and chronic back pain inspired her to help others harness their innate ability to shift from survival mode to thriving. On this episode, we'll be discussing the impact of genetics on nervous system regulation, chronic pain, eating disorders, and perfectionism. Dr. Kessler will share her expertise on how understanding our nervous system can help us unlock our innate ability to heal and thrive. We'll also explore the integrative approach to healing, including personalized auditing, education, community support, and actionable steps for lasting results. So whether you're interested in genetics or nervous system health, or seeking ways to improve your health and wellness, this podcast is for you. Join us on the Genetic Genius as we unravel the complexities of genetics and health and explore the power of self-healing through nervous system regulation. Hi, everyone. We're thrilled to have Dr. Kelly Kessler to the show today, a renowned physical therapist and wellness coach who specializes in helping individuals transform their pain into power through nervous system regulation. Welcome, Dr. Kelly.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yay, me too. Such a great conversation. One of my favorites. I love talking about the nervous system, so it's going to be super fun.
Yes.
Totally. Before we dive deep into our conversation of the nervous system, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about yourself and introduce us to, your story, what inspired you to become a licensed physical therapist and wellness coach, and a little bit about your journey, which is a great, interesting story. I don't want to, no spoiler alerts, but I want you to talk about kind of that part of your journey as well.
Sure. Yeah. So it started many years ago, never anticipated my life evolving to what it has today. But it all started with an eating disorder that I had in my late 20s. I'm sorry, my late teens, early 20s. And even that kind of evolved. So I was an athlete. I just worked hard. That's all I knew. And I struggled with transitioning into college, and then I had transferred, and there's just a lot going on in my life. And I recognize it now, but at the time I was coping with exercise. I would eat breakfast, go out and exercise, eat lunch, go out and exercise. I would exercise with the team. I was a field hockey athlete, so I'd go exercise with the team. And then while everyone was out going out to the bars, I was exercising and did that every single day. And then I ended up transferring schools, very much felt like I was an odd man out because the team had already been formed at the college. And that's when things started spiraling out of control, and the exercise ramped up more and more. And then it got to the point where I was also binging too, as well. So I was binging and then exercising to compensate for that. And it ramped up to a point where I couldn't control the calories I was taking in with exercise alone. And then I started vomiting. And it was really then that I realized I had a problem. I really just thought I was an athlete the whole time. And then it was like almost like the wake up call. Oh, this is something deeper. Even with the realization of that, that was my comfort zone. I did not want to give it up. So I did not tell anybody what I was going through. I very much had a facade on. I was a perfectionist. I put on this perfect picture of I'm this very strong athlete. Everything is great. And meanwhile, I felt like I was like dying inside. I just felt like a fraud. Like I'm putting on this persona and actually even getting encouragement from everybody. Wow, you're so determined. I wish I had your grit and determination. And meanwhile, I'm like, if you only knew what the driving force was. And so that continued on for years. And then it only got worse. And then I realized I was in a deep, dark place. I had a moment where I was sitting on the floor shaking. I had just exercised, vomited twice. My heart was pounding out of my chest. My eyes were like bloodshot. And I'm like, I can't continue. Like I'm in my early 20s. I don't want to live the rest of my life like this. And I was scared. I was very scared. And I knew I did not want to live like this. I didn't know how I would get out of it. But gradually, again, over years, crawled my way out of that dark hole and took many ups and downs, setbacks, you name it. But eventually got to the place where I wasn't being controlled by my eating disorder. But when I found relief from that, I had chronic back pain from the
Mm,
constant pounding on the pavement. And what I realized was the emotional turmoil I had gone through the eating disorder that I had never resolved. And so went through the everything I could think of, heat, hot, cold, exercises, the whole regimen. I went to practitioners and I had a practitioner basically take an x-ray of my spine. They're like, "You have half the disc height for a 25-year-old and
mm,
it's only going to get worse." And that's kind of it. And so I just felt very hopeless at that time. I ended up going on to become a physical therapist after that, still had back pain. So I'm like, okay, now I can help myself. I learn about the body. My husband's a physical therapist. So I'm like, all right, here we go. I can actually take care of myself. And I approached it very much from an orthopedic standpoint. I was doing strengthening, stretching, manipulations, everything I could think of for what I was presenting. Still didn't have that relief. It would be like temporary and then it would come right back. And I noticed it very much ebbed and flowed with the levels of stress that I experienced. And this again, moving on many years, I'm fast forwarding this a lot, but I was sitting down watching the documentary Heal on Netflix, and I'm like, and they talk about the mind body connection. And it was like a light bulb. I'm like, oh my gosh, I never addressed myself, like the emotions, the mental fatigue that I had, my nervous system. I never ever looked at that for my own pain. And the same determination that kept me going this whole time was the same determination I used to facilitate my own learning. And the more I learned about the nervous system, and I had learned about a PT school, but really dove into what can I do to take action. It was like the door opened up just a little bit, and that's all I needed. And
mm.
it really, I've really just implemented everything I've learned, and I am sitting here pain free. I've had 2 children. I played field hockey again. I do triathlons. I do half marathons, like living my life without being tethered down by pains. It's been amazing. And that's why I'm such a firm believer in working through the nervous system. And I know it's possible to heal. I've been in a place where I didn't feel like it was possible. And here I am today. That's what's
Mm.
inspired me.
Wow, Dr. Kelly, what an amazing story. Thank you for sharing because I think people can really relate when they hear, especially a healer's journey, right? It's like what inspired you on your journey to help others. And not all of us have this, your story is amazing. Not all of us have that specific piece, but I think that we can,
Mhm.
when listeners can relate, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
I had something very similar. What can I do?
Yeah.
And I really like how you found the mindset component, and that piece
Mhm.
was like the light bulb moment, right? It's
Mhm.
whoa, okay, actually when I look at
Yeah.
how I'm doing in the inside, maybe that can really be the
Mhm.
switch for how everything else
Yes.
is connected.
Absolutely.
Mm,
Completely. Yeah. And part of that too was that I was always like, go hard. I never took a moment to slow down. And it
mm,
was really that point I realized like my accomplishments and everything do not determine myself. And that
mhm.
was part of that perfectionism I had to work through and realize that I need to prioritize my own self-care, which was something I never had done before.
And that's the
Mhm.
key, like, root of everything, right? When we prioritize our self-care, all those other puzzle pieces just come into place. It's like, boom. It's like, oh, wow.
Yes.
But I think sometimes that's the hardest thing for us to do is to take care of ourselves for some reason.
So true. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So let's talk about nervous system regulation. So let's talk about, can you first kind of explain what that might mean to our audience? Because of course you and I understand that, but some people might not even understand like what the central nervous system is, or so let's break it down a little bit.
Yeah. So if I'll talk about it's like our phone. So we have an
Mm,
operating system in our phone and our computer, and it dictates every system that goes on, tells when things to turn on, turn off. And that's known as our autonomic nervous system. So it's literally goes on in the background. It controls our digestion, our heart rate, blood pressure. It controls our hormones, controls our breathing rate, reproduction, libido, you name it, every function that thankfully we don't have to consciously think about. It's taken care of in the background. And so there are 2 branches off of that. There's a sympathetic branch and then a parasympathetic. But to make it easy to know, sympathetic is your stress branch basically, and parasympathetic is like your peace branch. So we want to mainly be within that peaceful realm. There's a lot more to it, but if you can think about, we want to be in parasympathetic most of the time and have sympathetic or the stress part of that nervous system kick on when there actually is a threat. But what happens when we are in a dysregulated state is that our stress side of that is on. We perceive everything to be a stress, and our work, home, environment, whatever it is that is constantly replaying in our head, even if it's not actually happening, if we're thinking about it, it's causing a stress response. And so now our system is constantly on. So that's very fatiguing. Think about running your car on high gear for hours, days, decades on end. It's draining. It drains the system. So you basically stay in that state for so long. But what happens is that every aspect of that autonomic nervous system that it's running is not balanced or restoring itself. It's constantly just trying to survive. So healing takes a back seat, reproduction takes a back seat, digestion takes a back seat. Everything that part of the parasympathetic branch that does is going to take a back seat because we're just trying to survive. And that's when we see a lot of breakdown within the body because the healing is not able to occur because we're trying to survive. It's not a priority.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great explanation. And I think a lot of people don't even realize they're in that chronic state of survival because their body is just
Yeah.
like trying to survive. So they've tuned out almost. It's like I like how that phone explanation, it's you're almost like not answering the phone anymore, right? Okay. Yeah, my body's calling me, but I'm way too busy to pick up the phone.
Yes, 100%. Yep.
Yeah. So when we're in that state of sympathetic, when we're in that stress state, responding to stress and anxiety, then how do we switch to start promoting like a healthy nervous system function to really start like improving the mental health? Like that's, I think, our one, and we're going to talk about it a lot more today too. But what's that kind of like basic switch to move into that parasympathetic state?
Yeah, it all starts with awareness. So we have to be aware that we're actually even in that state because like you said, we just are living in autopilot. We don't even know we're in that state. So bringing awareness to like how are you feeling? What are your energy levels at? How are you sleeping at night? What's your perception of pain? Is pain interfering with your life? What's your level of self-efficacy? Do you believe that you can heal? So just understanding where you're at is the first part of that. And once we start to dive into that, recognizing how our brain has become wired. So what have been these contributors that have contributed to that? And are we still dealing with them in our lives? So we have to be aware of what's our environmental factors, what's our internal factors, our limiting beliefs. There's so many things that go into how our brains get wired. And once we have a better understanding of that, we bring awareness to that. We can start reprogramming some of that through the subconscious, but we can also start working through the body and the mind-body connection to also help retrain the brain to bring it back to that parasympathetic or that peace kind of state. And there's a lot of things we can do that, like in particular, many of the clients I work with were using exercise as a coping mechanism, but that just makes the sympathetic branch fire even more. So one thing that I work on with people is to not just remove exercise because that can actually be a stress response, especially if they're using it as a coping mechanism, but how can we replace that in a way that it's serving the person and helping their nervous system get down to that more restful state. So starting with the smallest thing you can do and then gradually using the compound effect of habits to integrate a better routine in the daily sense and making it consistent.
That's great because I think that's a key piece when people are starting to realize they're in that chronic state of stress, right? And everything seems unmanageable, like trying to grasp at any straw that will help them switch. So it sounds like when you start using those habits and lifestyle moments a little bit by little, like building your pyramid up or that
Yep.
onion layer so that you're getting back on track. And when we're thinking about those habits, let's talk about the childhood component. What things do people really bring forward from childhood experiences and trauma that really affect their nervous system regulation and mental health in adulthood?
Yeah. So Interesting enough, our vagal tone is actually linked to our parents and our mother particularly. So
Mm,
even if your mother has a lot of like trauma and poor vagal tone, which is linked to, or at least associated with poor ability to buffer stress and all these things that we talk about, just from birth, we can start out with a certain level of vagal tone. But then throughout our childhood, we are in a different brain state. So our brain waves actually so what they do is that everything we're told and everything we experience, we believe to be true. So then our whole messaging gets developed in our childhood, and we carry these messages through our life and we don't even question them.
mm,
And so you may have been brought up in an environment that wasn't supportive, wasn't enriching and nourishing, and you may have been in survival mode from your childhood. So now your system's saying, I'm in survival. That's all I know, and we just need to hunker down, protect ourselves, and then you carry out that throughout life. Or maybe you've been told you're no good, you nothing, you're worthless, or whatever somebody may have said to you, and now you carry those messages, and again it puts you on the defense into this like survival mode. And again, even like physical traumas or whatever traumas we've experienced, it's a breach of our safety. So
mm,
when we experience trauma, our system says you are no longer safe. And what happens is that usually is a very emotionally charged event. And anytime we have emotion attached to an event or a thought, it creates a brain pattern or brain wiring that you will replay over and over again. And that's how these traumas can carry throughout life. So when emotions are attached, we can actually change, it actually changes the way our genes behave. It changes how our physiology behaves. And
mm.
that then carries out throughout life too. So a lot of the things we experience in our childhood can very much play a huge role in our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, our physical well-being throughout adulthood.
So true. I love that you brought up that piece also, Dr. Kelly, about genetics, of course, because
Mhm.
epigenetics, everything around us is that has an impact on our cells. And when we are having that trauma from childhood, it's that, as you said, it's almost like that pad that we've created,
Mhm.
and then that can be turning on or off those genes within us, right? So we could be having this response and a genetic response that we might not even be aware of, right? Whether that's causing us to be a certain thing emotionally with anxiety, or it could be a food response. There's so many different ways that our genes respond to the environment. It's just amazing. But I really like how you connected those pieces of the puzzle. We're really looking at a bigger puzzle when it comes to mental health and the nervous system. It's not just like you were talking about the vertebrae and how your vertebrae were shortened, or not shortened, but they were stacked less. Right. I can't remember what the term that you used. I'm not
Degeneration.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
degeneration.
degenerative.
Yes. I was like, what's in my mind? And how that piece can really impact us when we're adults. And also it's the verbal words that somebody's used to us to explain what might be going on in our body. And that can, like you were mentioning, like growing up in childhood, that can create that loop of trauma within us. Oh, I remember that person said XYZ. And every time you're in that situation, you remember that exact phrase like over. You're like, oh, yeah, okay, I can't do that. Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yes,
And yeah,
exactly.
such a huge component. And I'd love for us to talk about the mindfulness piece a little bit more and meditation practices. And how does that kind of play in regulating the nervous system, specifically with chronic pain, as you yourself went through that chronic phase piece? I know you are chronic pain phase. I know you
Mhm.
help out your own clients with that. And also in
Mhm.
relationship to anxiety and stress, because that's that piece you talked about with the sympathetic nervous system.
Mhm. Yeah. So meditation, I know a lot of times people who have chronic pain are like, oh, meditation, because a lot of times, and I was in this boat too. It's like you go to meditate and all you're thinking is all these negative thoughts. And
Right. I'm in
that's not
pain. How can I
necessarily
meditate?
yes, exactly. So I think sometimes it gets a bad rap because it's not necessarily implemented in the right ways. But
Mm,
when it is implemented in the right ways, it has profound effects. Part of that is that our brain waves will act in a way that matches what's going on. And so when we're super stressed, where we're in this like uber stressful state, our brainwaves are erratic, they're very quick, and nothing is really working well and synchronously in our brain. When we meditate, we slow those brainwaves down where we can start to process things in our brain. We allow our subconscious mind to open up and not just get into that survival mode constantly. We slow it down to the point where now we can start reprogramming it. So if we this all takes practice, but if you can slow it down and meditate enough, and now we start getting into our subconscious brain because the brain waves have slowed down to actually penetrate into that level, now we can start saying, questioning these beliefs that we have about ourselves and questioning these things that we've carried and all these burdens that we've had throughout life. We can get into that state. So there's a huge benefit just for the subconscious reprogramming, but there's also been a lot of benefit showing that your cortisol levels decrease because of that. There's also improved dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin levels, so a better
Mhm.
balance with that. So again, oxytocin is like that love neurotransmitter. It's that
Mhm.
connection that we have. Serotonin is the feel good one. And then dopamine is the motivation, drive, and reward. So we
Mhm.
start getting better levels of that so that our brains again can start getting into a place where we can become creative. We can want to be social with people. We can take risks, start having fun again. So those are all those benefits that we can start seeing once the brain is in a better place. But oh, no worries. But yeah, when you're in survival mode, none of that can happen because we're just trying to survive. So that's huge benefit to mindfulness, meditation, all those practices.
Yes, I love that piece that you talked about how the meditation can be the place where we might not want to try it again if it didn't work the first time. But then when we start really noticing the difference within our brainwaves, it might be so subtle. That's what I love about meditation. It's like so I always recommend, okay, maybe try practice for 30 days. And if you just start short, don't do a long time, and just then write down some things like at the day one. Like I was experiencing, I don't know, maybe like stress and anxiety. Those are great ones that and meditation really helps a lot with. And then at the end of that 30 days, go back and reevaluate. Like, how have you seen any difference? And maybe you don't notice it as much as maybe your outside community. Ask your family members, your friends, like, hey, how did I seem after the past 30 days? Did I seem different? Sometimes I think that meditation can be such a subtle and profound shift at the same time.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. It is those little things, but what's doing is it's elevating everything. It's elevating your energy levels. And now when your energy levels become elevated, your outside world starts to mirror that. So you'll actually notice that things that are happening, it just seems like these like synchronicities that you're experiencing, they start occurring, and then it just becomes this like catalyst for change in your life. So even though you
Mhm.
feel like, what is this doing? I don't really feel like I'm doing anything, but it's not the immediate effect. It's those things that you're planting the seeds and then you're going to reap the benefits later on. And just being consistent with it is the most important thing.
Oh, totally agree. Yeah, but yeah, how you said, like planting the seeds, because meditation is all about it's like you're watering your the garden in your brain and your nervous system,
Mhm.
really wanting to create a new environment for healing and growth. And when it comes to chronic pain, you were talking about creating these new patterns in our brain. So, what is the kind of that link between chronic pain and then mental health and these mental health conditions such as like depression, anxiety? And how does it really take place when we can maybe like we're treating or working on one, that then we actually can see this shift in that other piece that we didn't even know? Like maybe does that make sense what I'm asking? How do we see one condition can improve the other?
Yeah, kind of like the mind body connection.
Mhm,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of research showing that depression and chronic pain go hand in hand. And it is part of that. When you have chronic pain, you're probably not socializing as much. You're probably
Mm,
not doing the things that give you purpose and meaning. Maybe you can't work, so you have financial difficulty. You are maybe comparing yourself to how you were 10 years ago and what you were able to do. So there's a lot that plays into that mindset. Maybe you're sitting, I worked with a woman who literally sat on her couch all day long and
mm,
she couldn't even read, couldn't watch TV. She just sat there. So when you talk about quality of life, it significantly impacts quality of life. And of course, when you live like that for years, decades, however long you're experiencing that, it's going to wreak havoc in your mental health because your body is craving movement, your mind is craving purpose, and you're not getting that. And on the same aspect, when we have like depression, anxiety, mental health, things that we need to address, that also creates this like negative patterning that happens in our brain. And we start ruminating on things that aren't necessarily serving us, and all maybe everything that's happened in the past to us, or how somebody maybe have victimized you, or something someone said to you, or you get stuck in this pattern, or feeling worthless or feeling
Mhm.
hopeless. It's this all huge pattern of just like negative beliefs, either towards the world, yourself. And when we have that, again, you could think about if you're in that state where it's just constantly happening, your brain is going to get wired to feel like it has nothing to go to. It's going to
Mm.
feel like it is in that survival mode, because if you're telling it's yourself you're worthless, you're telling yourself you have nothing going on in your life, you start creating these habits of your brain wiring to be in that survival mode. And then that, again, you get into that chronic sympathetic response where you don't have a balance of peace and all those higher energy states that give you a better overall feeling in your body. You're in that low energy state and
Mhm.
you're in survival, and now you're in pain, and it's that vicious cycle that you continually experience.
Yeah, a great explanation, Dr. Kelly, because I think it's so true how when we are in that vicious cycle, it's like we don't like one thing feeds the other. It's, oh, like you mentioned, the chronic pain and the depression state. I think it's a huge piece that it's like you're not able to live your life fully in a way that you had before. And so now it's like everything I want to do, XYZ, I can't do those because I'm chronically in pain or I'm chronically depressed. Both of them feed back. So super important. And so you're talking about
Yeah.
really regulating or rewiring that nervous system so that you create a new pattern. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. And getting out of that vicious cycle, because what
Mm.
our brain does is that, okay, you know what? I'm going to be very fearful of this. And then it says, oh, we survived under this state. Okay. That was actually a good outcome. We're safe. Let's continue this. And it
Mhm.
does this. So it's actually doing a loop that serves you in a way that it keeps you safe, but it does not serve you in keeping you joyful, happy, creative, everything that we're destined to be in life. So we just keep this vicious cycle. So if we can change that cycle, break that cycle, now we give the brain another option for not experiencing the same thing over and
Mhm.
over again.
Yeah, so true. Yeah, sometimes it's so challenging to get out of that cycle. And I always remember, I don't know if you remember the show, but The Dog Whisperer with Caesar Milan. And he always talked
Yes.
about when a dog was in this kind of like state of attack mode or something to just distract it, like, not use the voice of the dog. So I always remember that when I myself am like stuck in some kind of like pattern, I totally do something completely out of the norm, right? To get myself
Yeah.
to think about something else, whether that's like music or I'll do some put on dance, something where my brain can break that loop. And because you just get stuck in it, it's like a groove on a record. You're like, rah, rah, rah. Totally.
Exactly.
So we're talking about these challenges of chronic pain and anxiety. And I know that a lot of women, especially that you specialize kind of like in this highly sensitive, people pleasing, like perfectionist woman with that type A kind of maybe personality. And I'd love for you to talk
Yeah.
about what that is specifically. And then why do you think that these women particularly are almost like suffering more maybe than a regular female model? And then how do we kind of switch out of that?
Yeah, the reason why I love working with women like this is because I very much was that person, and still am working through things, so I can relate to it completely. But yeah, that perfectionist thing is not just everything has to be perfect, it's that you have to stay busy all the time. You have to
Mhm.
your accomplishments match your self-worth. So if you feel accomplished, okay, now I'll feel worthy, and then you don't, and then you try to do more and more, and now I'll feel worthy and like I can love myself. And then it's just
Mm.
this like empty cycle you get into. And especially when you feel you're experiencing chronic pain, you want to be productive and have things continue to check things off your list, but yet you can't. So you're constantly in this battle, not feeling like you're enough, and just feeling insufficient. So
Mm.
that's part of it. And that again is just it plays on each other. And then the people pleaser mentality is that everyone's needs matter more than your own, and you constantly prioritize everybody around you, and you spread yourself so thin because you never want to disappoint anyone in your life.
Mm.
And yet you're spread so thin that you have nothing left for you. So you drain your tank before you even get to yourself. And then you wonder, why do I feel like this? I'm so sick of feeling like this. And you feel like you can't, it's like juggling all these balls. You can't keep them up, but the pressure's on to keep them up. And you're human and you can't, but you
Mm,
feel like you should be able to do that. And so that's part of it too. And then again, all that is intertwined. And then the highly sensitive person is the person that takes everything to heart. If someone says something that I was disappointed that, like, they like internalize that, or they just
mm,
listen to other people going through struggles and they feel for them so deeply that it almost feels like their own problem. And that then our brain can't just differentiate between what's our issues or somebody else's issues. So
mhm,
when we're super highly sensitive, we absorb all this energy that isn't necessarily ours to keep, but we keep it. So it becomes this perfect storm when you're perfectionist, you're highly sensitive, and you're a people pleaser. You
mhm,
literally are teaching your brain and your nervous system that you are not the priority. We will
mm,
take care of you when everybody else is taken care of. But yet, in reality, there's never an opportunity because everybody's always going to demand more and more of you
mhm,
until you start prioritizing yourself. And so that's why I help so many women in this position is like, how can you start prioritizing yourself and transfer your energy back to yourself? And again, it's just setting up those standards, those boundaries, and realizing that you are worth every bit of energy first. And you don't have to make sure everybody else is taken care of to do that, and giving yourself that permission.
Oh, so true. I was like, check, check, check. Listener, I'm
Mhm.
sure listeners out there are doing the same thing. It's like
Yeah.
prioritizing self-care is so important, but it's nice we put,
Mhm.
especially women, moms, working a busy
Mhm.
job, trying to like juggle, like you said, all those things. It's like, we're like, I'll just get to myself later. I'll just get to myself later. And I think we're seeing, especially the pandemic was a big eye opener for a lot of people. Okay, I have this time to prioritize myself. Was I doing it? And how can I
Mhm.
shift my life in a different way? Maybe do a different job or run my household
Yeah.
differently. And we only have one life, right? Only one time to really see how we can live it the best. And I think when we're
Mhm.
running on, like you said, I had this image of running on fumes, like this, like thin paper doll, like blowing in the wind.
Yes, so true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
trying to make things like stick and make them work, but it's not about making it, right? It's like that's like you have to really do it, really be able to like make the commitment, but in a different way, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. It's about taking the smallest action you can, but just being consistent with it. And that was
Mhm.
something that I had to learn on my journey because I thought I was like all in or I'm not in. Unless
Mm,
I could do it perfectly, I was a failure. And that's how
right.
I felt. And now my whole mindset shifted. I don't care about perfection. I care about consistency. And I have learned a heck of a lot more from failures than I have from being perfect in my life. And it's that consistency that if you miss a day, you fail. Okay, you're human. Get back on it tomorrow. Just don't miss a week, don't miss a month. And just doing the smallest thing you can possible and then growing from there. So if it's 1 minute a day, great. That's 1 minute more than you did yesterday. And if you add 1 minute a day just for a whole year, that's 365 minutes you took more than you did last year. So we can't try to implement all these things and say we have to do this and this because our brains don't like that. If we're already
Mm,
feeling overwhelmed, the last thing our brain wants is to say, "Hey, I got another job for you." We
right.
have to give nobody wants to hear that. So you have to give your brain the smallest bit to do. But the beauty of it is that momentum follows action. So once you
Mm,
start taking action, once you start seeing a little bit of change in your life, you're going to want to do it. And
mhm.
now the whole game has flipped in your favor. It's not about using willpower, it's about using your inner drive and starting to feel like, wow, this is awesome. I'm on the right
Mhm.
path. And then you're going to just go along with it.
That's great, Dr. Kelly. I love that because it's like when you have, it's like the carrot dangling out in front of you, like reading the horse. Okay, here you go. You can get
Mhm.
to that step, and then you feel the difference in what you've been doing. That small action, like waves, like rippling, and it's like this massive
Mhm.
effect, like accumulating on top of each other, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
And I want to go back to that chronic pain piece too, because I know that so many of our listeners suffer with chronic pain. And what are some effective treatments for chronic pain because I know we're in this opioid epidemic that really don't involve opioids and other potentially addictive medications. Besides, what are some of those things that you use? Was it just mainly like mindset, or did you use, I don't know, like acupuncture, massage? What are some things that you found helpful when you were dealing with your own stage of chronic pain?
Yeah. So the first thing I started off with breath work. So breath work is
Mm,
really like the foundation for everything I do. I incorporate it in almost every aspect. So
mm,
I always start someone off with breath work. Let's just learn how to breathe properly. And then we can build on that. There's so many breath work practices that I teach, but just starting with feeling the breath, being aware and connecting ourselves to the breath. So breath work is huge component to what I teach. Vagal nerve technique, so activating the vagus nerve, stimulating the vagus nerve. So you can do that through humming, gargling, even just gentle massage on the neck, a little bit of tugging the ear. So there's different
mm,
things you can do to stimulate the vagus nerve. And then I use a lot of visual work, so using the visual system. So our eyes are actually an extension of our brain. So if we can use our eyes in a way that is cueing the parasympathetic or that peace kind of system to turn on, now we can really use that to transition the nervous system out of that survival mode. So I do a lot of different visual exercises in conjunction with the breath work. So I combine those. And then another part is I use movement. So I love movement and I love to teach movement through in a different way. So it's not here, let's get on the bike for 10 minutes. It's not that. It's the thing is that we, especially if you have chronic pain, you're so disconnected from your body because that's been a survival coping mechanism. You may not even be aware of how your body is responding. And a lot of times when we have chronic pain for so long, we have this constant tension within our body. And a lot of that is because our fascia, which is the connective tissue throughout our body, is highly sensitive and highly has a lot of sensory nerves in it. It's
mhm,
very integrated with the nervous system. So when we're in survival mode, our fascia actually changes its properties to be very taut and tight, and it becomes very thick. And so what happens is that our body starts getting into these like tightened postures. And so learning how to connect with the body and using the nervous system to cause a relaxation within the body and allow for release in the body is huge. So I teach a lot of like breathing and then movement combination, but gentle movement, because of course, anyone who has chronic pain, the last thing they want to do is say, hey, let's go exercise. So it's like, what's the smallest bit of movement you can do that again opens that door for the body to be like, oh, okay, this is okay. I'm not in
mm.
pain. And then you build on that. So that's really the beauty of that. But those are just a few things that I use and on top of other things. And a lot of it is just processing how we are conceptualizing things, our perception of things, the messages we're telling ourselves in conjunction with using the physiology to change. So again, it's that mind body connection that we use both sides to work together.
So important, Dr. Kelly. And I really liked how you brought that breath work component in conjunction with the movement piece, because breath work,
Mhm.
like you said, retraining our body to breathe. And when we're in that sympathetic state, we're not breathing. Maybe we're
Yes.
breathing like way too fast, right? We're running from the bear, like
Yes.
trying to go as fast as we can,
Mhm.
bringing us back into our body, right? Having that breath grounded to the earth, being the body, realizing that breath is enabling all of our cells to be energized, right? It can also create that other piece too. And a lot of times when we're in
Yeah.
that chronic pain place, we don't feel energized. We're like, oh God, so tired,
Mhm.
so fatigued, like with chronic
Yes.
fatigue syndrome. And I like how you brought in the
Yeah.
movement piece, because doing that, but specifically how you said doing that smaller movements to really,
Yeah.
it's like the
Mhm.
realignment, like you said, with the fascia, the reconnection, as we've been talking this whole episode here about
Mhm.
reconnecting the patterns in the brain. So now it's like reconnecting, and our fascia goes over our entire body. So when we
Mhm.
work
Yes.
on one piece, we work on our whole body.
Exactly, absolutely. And when we are so disconnected for so long, we actually have this like sensory motor amnesia, where we may be contracting muscles and we don't even know we're doing it. So it gets retraining the brain to actually experience relaxation,
Mm.
because so much of that is just under the radar, where we don't realize that we're tensing because it's just our body's response to tense. Because think about what you would do if you saw a bear or a lion in the woods, you would tense everything up. And again,
Right.
that's a survival. So it is, it's just learning how to relax again, because it
Mm.
sounds silly, but we forget how to relax when we're disconnected for a long period of time.
Totally. Yes. I have to almost like retrain myself every day when I go to bed.
Yes.
Okay, let's take a shower,
Let the
put on the
shoulders
spot.
down.
Yeah, breathe.
Mhm.
Yes, I totally agree with that. And I'd love for us to talk a little bit more, Dr. Kelly, about the eating disorder component. And is that that's a component that you work with your clients, correct? And
Yeah,
so,
so I don't actually, so I work with people who are mostly recovered from eating disorder. So I'm not actually working with the eating disorder, but people who have gone through an eating disorder.
okay, perfect. Yes, thanks you for clarifying that. When patients come to see you and they've already been in that state of realizing that they had this eating disorder, what are some of those strategies that you work with them in helping them to get to that next state of, of recovery?
So people who have had an eating disorder, you're saying? I
Right.
just want to make
Yes,
sure I'm understanding. Okay.
they're in the state that you are working with them in, which
Yeah.
is yes,
Okay.
they've realized it, they've already gotten some help, they're understanding it within themselves, or verbally, like you said in the beginning, being able to talk about it, talk to others about it, which is a huge piece of eating disorders. So when that stage happens, how do you then work with those clients in that next phase of overcoming that upset in their system?
Mhm. Yeah, so a lot of it is an educational component to start with, because a lot of people who have had an eating disorder don't realize that the physical symptoms they're experiencing are actually very much related to the emotional trauma and everything that they've gone through the eating disorder. So I very much educate on how what you've been experiencing, what your body has gone through. And again, when you're experiencing an eating disorder, that's survival mode. You're just surviving at that point. So I explain how, when you live in survival mode for that long of a time, how your body is responding and why you may be experiencing digestive issues, why you may be experiencing migraines,
Mm.
headaches, teeth grinding, how a lot of these components that you may be experiencing could be related to the same root cause.
Mm.
So a big part of that is just the knowledge and understanding, because there's so much power when you understand that you're not crazy. There's not something wrong with your body. It's literally how your body is set up to work. And I find that just takes the pressure off of people to realize that, okay, my body is doing exactly what it's designed for. There's not something wrong with me. It's doing what it's supposed to do. And once they have a good understanding of that, now it opens up the door, be like, okay, let's start working on that. And then I go right into, okay, what are some of the coping mechanisms you're using with your pain right now? So is it over exercising? How is your relationship with food? Are you still using food as a coping mechanism? What is your support system like? So do you have a support system? What's your environment like? Just understanding and bringing awareness to that, because again, it's everyone's at a different stage in recovery. So how is that still impacting the nervous system? And then how can we start reframing and retraining some of those thought processes? So when someone's coming to me in that state, it's very much just working through the brain and then integrating some of those tools I was talking about later on. Again, just understanding the connection first, and then how can we retrain the nervous system to not be in survival mode, open up the door, and now we can start adding some of those daily habits
Mhm.
in.
Yeah, that's great, Dr. Kelly, because it is a lot to think about when our body has been in this state of fight and flight for so long. And
Yeah.
I think it's super challenging to move from that state of it's a lot to do, like you said, like that self-awareness piece and having that compassion for because it's a time when you were damaging yourself in some way, like intentionally, and that can be really hurtful for someone when we're like they get to that, oh my gosh, I was doing this to myself. Why did I do that to myself? What was happening? And I think creating that safe environment, like you said, is so important. And that's what we do as healers in every piece. I work with my patients, like we want to create the safe environment for them to be able to explain to us what's going on to help them move through that painful piece. Okay, it's like you can when we recognize that piece within ourselves or that part within ourselves, we can love it and we can look at it in a different way. Okay, I did that, but that doesn't mean I'm doing it right now. It's just a
Mhm.
part of what I was doing in that time period. It could have been from anything like we talked about earlier. It could have been from a trauma
Mhm.
from childhood. It could be from anything.
Yeah.
And the awareness component is so important.
Huge. Yeah, absolutely. And when you bring it to the light and you bring awareness to it, it can't grow anymore. And also
Mhm.
it's so much of an eating disorders that you keep everything suppressed. So you just hold it in. And when we have all that, I was there. It's like I put on a good show, like everything's great. And I just suppressed all that. So that's very much part of that too. But when we start allowing some of those things to come open, it just allows the energy state in within us to change. And now those things no longer control us when we start accepting them.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, that's a huge piece you just said right there. Like not allowing them to control us. We're switching that switch. And so that we're now in
Mhm,
control of our environment and with a different set of glasses on. We're like, okay, I can see that over there. And how has that been controlling me? What
mhm,
pieces can I bring, like you said, with meditation or that awareness component to help things shift? So important. And with that
mhm,
perfection piece, that kind of becomes like the barrier, right, to personal
mhm.
growth and mental health. So
Yeah.
what are some tips for letting that go? Letting go the perfection tendency, which a lot of us have out there.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's challenging. I'm still have these things that I'm like, okay, still deal with it. I think it's an ongoing battle because if you've thought a certain way and you've attached your worth to your accomplishments and you feel like you
Mhm,
always have to stay busy and all this, it is a challenge to change that mindset. But I think the big thing is that our brain works off of evidence. So if we do something a little differently, so if we feel like we always need to stay busy, and we take a moment to step away and we feel good about that. So maybe we took a moment to step away, we do some breath work or just some 5 minutes of meditation and like our system feels good. Okay, the world didn't fall apart in those 5 minutes that you took away. So it's again just starting small and realizing that okay, it's okay to take those moments. You don't have to stay busy in this time. Things are not going to completely fall apart like we may think they are because we feel like we always have to keep everything going. Or maybe
mhm.
it's just something like accepting help. So as a perfectionist, it's really hard to accept help. We have to do everything ourselves because nobody could do as good of a job as we could. And it's just more work for us to tell them how they should do it than us to do it ourselves. So
Mm,
maybe it is just saying, okay, I'm going to let my husband do the dishes and that's okay. Or whatever it is, like just accepting help, or we're in a place where maybe you wouldn't have accepted help, whatever it is. But the big thing with perfectionism is just realizing that with consistency, there's more benefit being consistent than perfect. So if you miss one day of something and you get right back on, celebrate that. And that's the big thing, is celebrate your successes when you are consistent. Don't
mhm.
celebrate only when you're perfect. So that was a big lesson for me because during my eating disorder, I went 2.5 years of doing 500 crunches every single day, didn't
Mm,
miss a day, and even through food poisoning and everything. So I was so anal about never missing a day. And now I'm like, okay, I missed a day. That's fine. I got right back on the next day. Great. Good job. And so
mhm.
it's about celebrating that and giving yourself some grace. It's okay. And just recognizing what good you're doing. And I think that's a really big thing for just creating that change in your life. And again, it is a process. It's not linear. You'll have setbacks, but as long as you're making a conscious effort to move forward, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think I love that you said that, Dr. Kelly, about celebrating and not being the perfectionist when it comes to every day, every moment. And I talk
Mhm.
about that. I was talking about that with a patient today who missed their evening supplements. I'm like, it's okay. Your body's
Yeah.
going to be okay if you don't take your supplements in like
Yep.
one evening and get back on
Mhm.
it tomorrow. And then just be gentle with yourself. I think when we give ourselves, like you said, that grace of just to live, and then we can really open the door and expand to things that might not have been like, oh, look what I was able to do differently, or maybe that
Mhm.
supplement wasn't the right one for me. Maybe I really need something
Mhm.
different. The routine can sometimes mess us up.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you take a step back, you can see things clearer. So it is almost good sometimes to have a moment where you're not just focused on that perfection.
Right. Yes. I love routine, but
Mhm.
I also love spontaneity. It's like this interesting like
Mhm.
mix. And I think we can get into the rut, and especially when it comes to health, when we're trying, which isn't health, it's not about trying, right? When we
Yeah.
be in what we're trying to, that's not what I want to say. When we're being in the moment of really accepting who we are when it comes to our health, then that allows the shift to happen, right? Instead of it just, okay, this is who I am in the moment. It's okay for me to be in that space instead of it just being so hard on ourselves. And I think that's what the real point you were making. Like, we just have to give ourselves grace.
Yeah,
Hey, good job.
exactly.
Pat ourselves on the
Yeah,
back because we're the ones that are so
absolutely.
hard on ourselves. Nobody else is judging
Totally.
us.
Exactly, we're our worst critic, but yeah, exactly, and if it's almost counterproductive when we try to be perfect and then we come down on ourselves, like, how does
Mhm.
the nervous system respond when you're critiquing yourself? It's gonna go into survival mode, so if you don't give yourself that grace, you're actually things are gonna backfire. It's
Mhm.
better for your system to say, "Okay, this is the natural ebb and flow." It's not like everything has to be right on every day. It's just keeping it consistent, so you don't meet that resistance because if you don't find any kind of pleasure in getting better, you're eventually going to wear yourself down to where you don't want to do it. And that's a big
Right.
thing. Cannot really be willpower long term. We have to make it somewhat enjoyable where we're getting a benefit from it if we want it to be long term, which it needs to be.
Yeah, health totally has to be long term. And when it's boring, monotonous,
Mhm.
hard work,
Yeah.
there's no compliance. Like patient, oh, I'm not going to do
Yeah.
that. That is horrible. I'm like, okay, I don't want you doing something you think is horrible. Let's switch that up.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, it has to be, like you said, something that makes us feel better, something that we can really enjoy. And of course, maybe not everything we're doing every moment is enjoyable. I don't know. I would hope that it would be, but
Yeah.
sometimes we have to do things that might not be at the moment enjoyable, but maybe we can shift them so that they are more enjoyable. Because that's what life
Exactly.
about.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's, yeah, we have to do life and life is not always enjoyable, but those moments that you set aside for yourself, I'm really a big advocate on bookending your day. So start your
Mm,
day with some time for yourself and end your day with time for yourself. So those moments have to be really enjoyable because otherwise you're defeating the purpose. So if you're doing something during that time and you don't really like it, then change it. Like my self-care routine is always evolving. So you need a self-care routine that fits your life and for what you need. And so those moments have to be non-negotiably enjoyable. But yeah, the rest of life, it
right.
happens.
Yes, I do the same thing with the bookends, but I have one in the middle. So I have like my
Oh,
morning,
that's good.
yeah, my morning self-care, and then I have something in the afternoon that I'll do around lunch, whether that's sit in the sun or I'll do even like a little mini meditation or go for a walk, something that can break the day up. Especially now I sit so much, whether now I'm more at the computer, I've got to have more movement. So I found that to be
Absolutely.
for me so much healthier now and then doing that evening care routine. So yeah, I totally agree. And the love, maybe you don't have time for all of those things we just mentioned, but pick one,
Exactly.
at least one, right? Where you're giving yourself care and then add it more.
Exactly.
Put it in your calendar, make a date
Mhm.
with yourself.
That's it. Exactly. Absolutely. Non-negotiable.
That's right. Yes. As we're wrapping up today, Dr. Kelly, one last question. If you had an unlimited budget, what would you do right
Mhm.
now to make the biggest impact on the health and welfare of our planet?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I would just bring people to a place and do a retreat and just do like an immersion week or whatever it is, and
Mm,
just have people just take a moment for themselves, remove yourself from your daily routine, immerse yourself into an environment, a space, an energy where you can experience something different. And that really would be the catalyst for you to pursue that more in your life. So if I had an unlimited budget, I would just get as many people to come to a beautiful place and just immerse them in everything that is serving of them and so that they can carry that with them.
I love that. Retreats are so needed and they're so profound and they're life changing for people. If you haven't been on a retreat out there and you're tuning in, find one, come on one with me, or find on one that's in your local area because it can really be this place of transformation. And I think that you hit it right on the head, Dr. Kelly. We need more of those for people to
Mhm.
understand who they are, who they want to be, and how to transform.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
So tell us about, you have two things I wanted to talk to you about. First, tell people how they can find you, your website, and then follow you on social media. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. So my website is optimalu health and wellness.com. And on socials, I'm under Dr. Kelly Kessler, all one word. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. So you can find me there.
Great, super easy. We'll put all those in the show notes for everybody tuning in, so be able to stalk Dr. Kelly all over the social media.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I post regularly. There's a lot
Nice.
to
That's
see.
great. Yeah, so fun. And tell us about, so you have a 6-week program for helping perfectionists get relief from pain. And tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Kelly.
Yeah, sure. So it's called Perfectionist Pain Release Academy. And like you said, it's a 6-week program. And so take you through a full audit of your life, looking at, again, your energy level, sleep, pain catastrophization. So how you view pain interference. So how is pain interfering with your life? Looking at your self efficacy, so your belief system. So I look at all kinds of aspects of your life. So, what I was talking about today on the podcast. And then I take you through all those tools and implementing habits into your life that will stick. So, I not only teach you how to do this, but I teach you how to actually implement habits that stay in your life. And again, don't rely on willpower and that don't feel overwhelming. Yeah, it's a transformation. It's the exact blueprint that I use to transform my life from that perfectionism pain, post eating disorder to the place I am today where I'm enjoying life, I'm present for my kids, and it's just enjoying my body and what it's capable of. Yeah, so that's what I've created to share that with people, how it's transformed my life.
That sounds like a great program. We'll put the link in the notes as well for everyone tuning in. You can check that out. And Dr. Kelly also has a great freebie checklist. Tell us about this daily checklist where that people can access.
Sure. Yeah. So my daily checklist is just that. It's a checklist of different habits that you can implement during the day. So I talk about gratitude, but I talk about gratitude within looking within. So what are you grateful for within yourself? And what are you grateful for in your external world? So it's important to recognize that. And gratitude is a huge part in rewiring our brains. I talk about getting regular sunlight. So sunlight it's a huge catalyst for getting our circadian rhythm balance,
Mm.
so where we can get to sleep at night. So a lot of times people look at sleep habits and they say, okay, the thing's just around sleep, but it's actually what we do throughout the day that affects our sleep. That's on there. I show breath work techniques. So I give you a breath work that you can do every day. So there's things that every day, if you did these, and it would only take you a few minutes every day, that if you started doing this, you would actually notice your system would be in a better place. So again, so small little habits. And this is really just like a starter checklist that you can start with and start feeling the benefit of that.
That's great. I love that. And we'll put the link for that as well. Thank you, Dr. Kelly, for joining us today. I loved our conversation about rewiring the brain and really checking in about the nervous system regulation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me here. It's such a pleasure to be on.
Thank you so much.